We're talking with Mike Landis, an independent trucker and CEO of the USTA. Mike's a friend of the Truck Boss Show, and he was on our panel at the Boss Exchange at GATS. Mike, I wanted to ask you today, I'm going to be talking later with a gentleman from TuSimple, one of the autonomous trucking companies. And I'd like to know your thoughts as an independent trucker about autonomous trucking. What are your concerns, and what would, are there any circumstances under which you think autonomous trucking would be beneficial?
There's some benefit to it in certain ways. Some of it is a little satire-ish in a way. Some of the benefit from it maybe could be that with the lack of training we have out here, it could potentially help with some of the way some of the drivers are out here just due to lack of not having the knowledge that they should have before they hit the road. Other than that, I don't really see much benefit from it. Other than someone somewhere is going to make a buck off of it, other than those of us out here driving the trucks up and down the road.
Sure. Now, do you think it's going to have a direct impact on independent truckers, or is this something that's going to be primarily a concern for company drivers?
I think for a decent amount of time to come, it's going to affect those that run from a point to point, more or less. Your like package type delivery drivers, like your UPSs or your FedExes, or people that go from warehouse to warehouse and do the same exact thing all the time. For someone like what I do, or someone that runs, say, oversized or something like that, I don't think you're going to see it impact, in all honesty, a whole lot. I believe it really will impact it's still a large portion, but in the grand scheme of things, a smaller portion of the industry.
Now, are there circumstances under which you would think autonomous might be beneficial?
No.
So you just think it's the latest toy?
I think, in all honesty, I do believe the technology is awesome. To me, I can't hardly fathom taking circuit boards and resistors and wires and whatever and making something like an 80,000-pound truck be able to take itself down the road. I think those guys are incredibly smart individuals and can do something that I'll never be able to do. But I think it's a horrible, horrible idea.
Why?
First of all, you're taking away jobs from the American people that are out here. Maybe you're taking away a job from someone that enjoys what they're doing, or they're making that job worth less money in a sense. Also, everyone is getting so reliant on this computer age type stuff that I think we're forgetting how unreliable they really can be. And out here on the road, all it takes is that computer to glitch for 1 second, and you could have a catastrophe. And now I know we've all at this day and age used some type of computer or pad or phone, and I don't know anyone that hasn't cuss those things on a regular basis because they don't do what they're supposed to do at times. So, and I understand they want to have someone behind the wheel and this, that, the other thing, but what does that really do? In all honesty, what does someone sitting here like this gonna do if that thing loses its mind and decides it's turning a sharp right or left-hand turn because the computer fouled up? Unless you actually have hands on the wheel, you're not going to react in time. And a good reference is go up to anybody and take $1 bill and put the head of the president in the middle, long ways, and drop it and see if they can catch it before it falls halfway out of their fingers. No one will be able to catch it. So even if your hands are on the wheel, right, unless you're actually controlling that truck with a firm grip, you're not going to react. And if you got to pay that much attention, why are you not just driving the truck in the first place? I know their technology is good, and they say it's got reaction and it can read. The Schmitz have done pretty extensive research on this and talked to these people too, and it says it can determine the difference between an animal and a human on the road. Like, if something were to happen and we have to make a split-second decision driving, am I going to hit this deer or am I going to hit this person? Well, I'm going to hit the deer. Does the computer know that? They say they're working on it. But these are all things I think that people need to think about. It sounds great, and maybe companies feel like they could save themselves some money. But if we're going to talk about real safety on the road, anyone that puts their trust in a computer is out to lunch as far as I'm concerned.
What are your primary safety concerns? You've mentioned some of them.
In the technological age that we're in, and this goes back to even ELDs with having steering assist that they came out with, and automatic transmissions and crash avoidance systems, and everything's electronically controlled in trucks now, basically, for the most part. So now we've created an actual machine where it's basically a big RC car, right? And I said you could do that with an ELD before, because if you can hack an ELD and you can get it in the computer of the truck, you could potentially drive it to an extent. Well, now we have something that's built to drive itself through nothing but electronics and, satellite guidance and these little sensors and stuff like that. So, I mean, the U.S. government can't even keep people from hacking their own systems. How are they going to keep people from hacking into these trucks and driving them at their discretion?
Sure.
For one. For two, I hate this topic to an extent, because everyone thinks because we've seen them being tested out on the roads and stuff now that it's just around the corner. But unless it's a perfectly clear day, they can't use this stuff.
Right.
It's been proven in the rain and the snow and anything other than a sunny day, they can't really use it. I mean, I believe they can at night if it's clear, but they also have to perfectly map out for some of them the route that it's going to take.
Right. Well, I think that the head of Pronto at GATS said that the marketing department and the hype departments are about 10 years ahead of the engineering departments.
The scary thing is we've seen things thinking that they were never going to come to light 10 years ago come to light. And technology is ever improving and evolving. So it's definitely something we need to be worried about, I think, and keep an eye on for sure. Immediately, I don't think we're going to have any effects of it for a while, just because, I mean, think about it. Until they can get a truck to drive through some type of inclement weather, there's really no point in even having it, because you're going to be driving along on a sunny day and a thunderstorm pops up out of nowhere. And if the dude in the truck ain't paying attention, what's going to happen when they run into a wall of rain or something,
Sure.
Also, the other factor is, I mean, how many drivers out here can say they whacked birds driving down the road and stuff? They got all these sensors everywhere. You hit a bird and it takes one out. What's that truck going to do? If you're sitting here not doing anything and that bird takes out that sensor and that truck goes this way, you're a passenger along for the ride at that point. Because that's the problem. The railroad is probably the most easily automated thing that they could have automated since probably going back to even the 50s, 60s. Because if something happens with a train, it's not veering off the track. It's going to keep going until they figure out a way to get it stopped. And they still have to have two guys in the cab of a train.
Sure. And why do you think we keep talking about automated trucking before we're talking about automated trains?
Well, I mean, there's forms of automated trains out there. A lot of switching yards and stuff are using remote controlled style engines and stuff like that. But be perfectly honest with you, it comes down to the almighty dollar. Mm-hmm. There's people out here that have developed technology that stand to make a lot of money off of it, just like the ELDs and all these little gadgets and doodads they want to put in trucks now to make them safer. And someone stands to make a lot of money off of it, and they have the backing to push it and push it and push it. And this goes back to my frustration that was showed at a listening session in DC on the Hours of Service a few weeks ago, where instead of looking at the real problem and listening to real solutions from people that are out here on the road for make them safer, they're listening to people that have never done this job, that are paid by someone like these companies to go represent a false narrative so they can sell this stuff. And it's been working. It's been working all these years. But now finally, there's folks like myself and Trucker Nation and individuals and stuff like that that have come to the front and said, hey, wait a minute, hold it. these people are full of crap. You know, it's sad that we're going to push safety so someone can make a buck, because we can create safer roads, which is the whole purpose, from what I understand, behind this autonomous thing, is to try and make the roads safer. Sure, there may be a cost benefit somewhere along the line to a company, but I really don't see it in the long run, because this technology is only going to be good for so long. And what happens when you have to update how many thousands, millions of trucks every couple of years, you know?
Do you think it's possible to make these trucks? Do you think it's possible to make autonomous trucks totally safe ever?
Well, you never say never, right? But I feel like no matter how great technology gets and how good computers get, we're always going to have computer problems. Case in point, I loaded at a place in Chicago early this morning. I waited 2 extra hours on paperwork because their system was down, and they ended up having to handwrite it themselves. You know, the one thing that never fails? Human interaction. So I'm going to say that I don't know that well, is it incredible technology? Like I said, yeah, absolutely. It's neat, and I like learning about it because it's interesting. But is it going to ever be any safer? I don't think so. Not compared to a well-trained person that respects what they're driving down the road.
So if you were talking to somebody from an autonomous trucking company today, what would you ask them?
I would ask them why they feel their technology is going to be safer than, say, someone like myself that has 15 years and almost 2 million miles of proven experience. Do people mess up and we have accidents? Sure. But where do we put the blame, and how do we deal with it then when there's no human involved and the computer fouls up? Who's that going to fall back on? Because if I have a truck that has their technology on it and it fouls up and kills somebody and they come after me, I'm going back after that company that created the product, because they created a lousy product.
Now, what do you think of this concept, this kind of intermediate concept they're talking about called platooning?
Where they have the trucks following each other and they react off each other?
You have a human-driven truck in the front, and then it's followed by several automated vehicles, almost like a train.
I can see their concept and how they talk to each other. But same thing falls in. You got a human. You're relying on a human now to drive a truck in the front and lead the way. And then also relying on a computer once again to keep the trucks in line behind. And what happens when a wire rubs through and breaks? Because ask anyone that drives a truck, we have light problems out the yin yang every winter because of this stuff they put on the roads. You know, a wire clip can break and it rubs against something and it cuts through the wire and shorts out. You know, a computer can't make it. When a computer loses contact, it loses everything. And on something that relies on so many sensors, it only takes one to foul up, and it's going to throw that whole thing off.
Sure. Now, do you think, I mean, one of the things that's been said about autonomous trucking is that it will address this driver shortage that we've heard so much about. How do you respond to that?
There's not a driver shortage. There's a driver turnover problem. And if there is any type of driver shortage, it's lack of properly trained drivers. I think the driver shortage is a myth that has been brought up, at least in the size that they talk about, right? Just to push this kind of stuff. It's another false narrative that's being pushed to, for one, get around stricter training rules for those of us that, you know, people that are looking to get into the industry so they can push people through quicker for the bigger companies, and two, push this type of technology. I really don't believe there's a type of shortage. If you go look on the load boards right now, there's not a surplus of freight around, which tells me that these companies are claiming, oh, we're losing drivers. Yeah, because they treat them like crap, is what it comes down to. These big companies do not treat their drivers as if they're humans. They treat them as if they are automated. automated people. It seems like sometimes, Um, so I really feel like that just falls into the hands of all this stuff and helps push that along. And there's really, if you ask anybody out here that's been doing this any amount of time, there is no driver shortage.
Given the fact that fully autonomous vehicles are 10 years in the future, do you see there being any kind of role for these? Is this an inevitable situation?
In my experience driving, I've done many different types of trucking. And the one thing I might say that there may be some type of role for these trucks in is sometimes you go to like a chemical plant or a steel plant, and they're big and they have vehicles in their compound, right, in their facility, that move things around for them. They might take this piece of steel over here to have something done to it, or they might transport this over here, maybe for something like that. But a good friend of mine works for a large, well-known car manufacturer, and they tried to automate their forklifts a few years ago. They figured, well, you know what? We don't have to pay people to drive them. We know where they are all the time. We can make them more efficient to move our products around. You know what they found? As efficient as they thought it was supposed to be in theory, in reality, they spent a lot of money for nothing, because they've since ripped all the stuff out and went back to using humans to drive forklifts because it wasn't working the way it was. It just wasn't as efficient. They can tell a human to go drive their forklift wherever they need to go, and they can do it. Can't do that with the automated stuff. They did what they could do, but it took up more room in the warehouse the way they had it set up with their sensors and everything. And they just found the juice was not worth the squeeze. And in all honesty, I think there's a very small portion of trucking that this would benefit as far as a company is concerned, maybe. But just take what I do, for example. I pull, smooth bore food grade liquid tankers. The surge, there's no computer out there that's going to be able to react to how this stuff moves going down the road when you go into a corner or have to get on the brakes or whatever else. We do that out of what it feels like in the seat of our pants to keep the truck from rolling over, basically. I know a guy that drives for a pretty large tanker company that has done this his whole life. And even just the crash avoidance systems they have on their trucks now, he told his wife, if or when he dies in a truck accident because this thing kicks on, to sue the company, because he doesn't want this truck, but they're forcing him to drive it because he's due for a new truck and all their new trucks have it. And see, the thing is, for example, with a tanker, when you go into a corner, you slow down before the corner and then you accelerate through. If you go into a corner and slow down and that liquid comes front, it pushes you over, or has the potential to. And he's had it happen already in a corner. The shadow from a bridge has set this thing off and locked his brakes up.
Oh, man.
And, I've said this from the get-go, like all these things that are supposed to make things so much safer, and, all their solutions technologically to make the road safer is going to do nothing but hurt this industry. It's going to do nothing but hurt more of the motoring public and more drivers out here. And like I said, it comes down to the almighty dollar. Instead of looking at the root of the problem and teaching people the correct way to operate a truck on the highway and make sure they understand the responsibility of what we do with a truck out here on the highway, they're looking to technology to save the world. And we're going to go down a real dark hole if we continue on that path.
All right. Well, Mike, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for being on the Truck Boss Show, and we'll see you down the road.
You bet. I appreciate it, Brad. We'll see you in a couple days.